Doppio.
I'm Adam Maness.
And I'm Peter Martin.
And you're listening to the You'll Hear It podcast.
Daily music advice coming at you.
Coming at you today, sponsored by Open Studio. Go to Open Studio Jazz to check out all of our courses, including our piano courses and our Piano Access Pass. That's every piano course we make.
Yes.
Do that. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, because we are on YouTube.
We're back on YouTube.
Make sure to like and subscribe this video right now.
Right now.
Yeah.
Maybe even hit the little bell. Little bell. It looks like a little hand,
Put
like a little fist. So when we go live, which we, as it were, we are live jazz musicians. It could happen at any time.
That's right. Today, we are dominating our Lydian dominance.
That's right.
About that?
Well, I know about this because we've done this already, this episode. So this is going to be take two, as we say. We did it several weeks ago.
We had a little technical issue with the
I know
MIDI,
I know I wasn't supposed to talk about that, but that was fun. We did a whole episode, and then we lost the MIDI, and we almost put it out. But we know how much folks have been loving the beautiful screen below that you will see.
With
we're
keyboard.
redoing it, man.
Yeah,
That's how we roll here.
But it's all right. I could talk about Lydian dominance, at least once a week for several weeks in a row.
Are we going to be doing this once a week for several weeks?
God, I hope not. Well, let's get into it, though.
Okay.
So are we staying in the key of D flat? Because that could be fun.
Well, I don't know. I actually shifted back and forth. Yeah, let's do D flat. I think it's always good to look at things in sort of different ways, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Lydian dominant is a scale based off of the melodic minor sound. It is.
Is it? Okay,
Yes,
good. This is going to be another one, sort of like the altered scale, our award-winning altered scale, where we have two different ways of looking at it, but that might help some people.
It's the fourth mode of the melodic minor. So if we have our D flat Lydian.
Lydian. Oh.
We have our D flat Lydian dominant. It's based off of an A flat melodic minor. So in
Ascending.
Ascending. Oh my
melodic.
gosh, this classical dude. Okay, so for D flat Lydian dominant, we have D flat, E flat, F, G natural, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat. So it's just like a dominant scale.
Wait, you just called me classical and you said C flat.
Oh, because
instead
it
of
is.
B.
Because it is.
Okay.
Get your mind around it, man. So here's our regular dominant scale, right, with the G flat.
Yeah. So that's how I think about it.
This is, by the way, because we're in D flat. This is, I feel like we're advanced explaining right now.
That's
you
right.
You gotta do it.
We're
in D flat.
advanced splaining. We're
Advanced-splaining.
both mansplaining and advanced splaining.
Damn right. Okay, so that's our regular dominant scale. Our Lydian dominant, we just sharp that four, so we have a G natural here, as you so eloquently just played.
Now, would you normally hear, because actually what came out of the altered scale discussion in episode, I think that was great, was the different ways we think about it, the different ways that we hear that scale and sound,
Yeah.
and then different ways that that leads to us applying it in improvised situations, which
Yeah.
is so cool because we're not learning these so that we can have a theoretical mastery of it. We're not theory professors,
Right.
It might seem like we are, but we really want to try to help connect you guys with different approaches to applying this to your improv, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so, like, would you normally hear this as more of a Lydian scale with a dominant seventh or a dominant seventh scale with a raised fourth?
I think of this as a dominant 7 with a sharp 11.
Me
That's
too.
That's the first way I think about it.
Good.
Yeah.
So, but no, well, the first way you said was a melodic minor starting on.
That's what it's derived from.
Okay.
But you'll most often use this in the case of, like, again, if we're in the key of D flat here, or I guess G flat, D flat 7, sharp 11. This is the chord symbol, you might say. D flat 7, sharp 11.
Yeah.
And that to me implies a Lydian dominant scale. Right?
Yep.
So the first usage of this is actually as a dominant scale. I feel like this gets slept on a lot by people for using it as a dominant scale going to a 1. So again, D flat 7 sharp 11 to G flat major 6 9 here. It's a great way, like it's kind of like your first step into adding some tension to your dominant scale.
It's light tension. Right? Pretty light tension.
It's pretty light, but it does have that, right, which is a nice leading tone towards the 9 of the major.
It's almost like it's Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone's sitting down. You got all the relatives. You got Uncle Bob and Auntie Susie. And everything is just straight, no tension. And then there's just a little bit, which is like, so, who are you supporting in the presidential election this year? Ooh, just a little tension.
Oh, Uncle Bob is adding some tension. Let's see what Aunt Kathy has to say.
Yeah, you haven't fully blurted it out yet, but right. So yeah, that's great.
So that's sort of level 1 is like your 5-1. You can use it as sort of your first step into altering a dominant chord. I like it because it's not as like sharp or as heavy as, say, if we were using an altered like a fully altered, kind of sound.
Yeah.
It's not that thick. It's not that dark, right?
Right.
It's more playful.
Yeah. Can I jump ahead to maybe what is not level 2, might be a higher level, but I think is an interesting one?
Sure.
Would be, this is a funny way to think about it, but melodically I would use this a lot. B, major 7 with a raised 5th, and then also up to the 11th. I mean, to the 9th.
What?
Yeah. Okay. So
Wait, what?
We talk about the jazz arpeggio, right?
Right.
Which is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9.
Right.
I mean, like over like a C7, it would just be C, E, G, B flat, D, but it could be anything, or it's just a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 7, and a 9. And so like that shape, because
I see what you're saying.
I use that so
I
much.
see.
So a lot of times I'll hear things melodically.
You're saying
that
it's
are
like an
based on-
arpeggio device.
It's an arpeggio
Yeah.
device, right?
So
You're not buying it, are you?
No, I am buying it because when we talked
'Cause,
about
even like
yeah,
that kind of thing.
No, when we talked about the altered scale, I use that shape, and that applies here as this is an A flat, melodic minor. It could be a G7 altered. It could be a D flat 7 sharp 11.
Yeah.
That shape, it's a very similar thing. That just arpeggiating the main chunks of the chord. You think of it like is a B arpeggio. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's more like kind of hearing it, because the thing with arpeggiating it like this and then moving up, it's kind of the natural way you would move up, as part of your line.
Man, you really went in the weeds on this early.
I did. I know. That's why I said I'm skipping ahead a couple. But
Also,
how it is, YouTube's a fickle crowd. If you don't get to
yeah.
it pretty
I know.
early, they're like, bam.
But again, it's even more in the weeds because it's like we're using D flat. So you said B arpeggio. It's really C flat. You know what I mean?
Oh, come on,
I
man.
know.
Woo!
I know.
But also I like the arpeggiated concept, and especially the jazz arpeggiated concept with the 7th and the 9th, because that reveals to your ears more than anything triad pairs. Because this was a term I didn't even know what that meant until recently.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it, but I was always hearing those kind of things. Triads being, some of the most kind of not dominant as in a dominant scale, but just dominant sounding elements to how we put together melodic improvisation.
We'll get there. Let's go over more of the functions of the Lydian dominant, ways you can use it, ways that it's mostly used.
So we're gonna
for.
do this 2 steps ahead, 1 step back, 2 steps ahead. Well, I like it.
Well, let's just try to go stepwise.
Good.
Let's try to do that first.
Hey, I'm a little jacked up on my green smoothie here, man.
So the most common way you'll use that, and like I said, you don't sleep on using it as an alteration for a 5 chord. But the most common way that most jazz musicians use Lydian dominants is for something like a 5 of 5, for a dominant chord, a secondary dominant chord, to make it a little bit more airy, a little bit less of a gravity, like a tonic dominant or a dominant.
Yeah, 5
So
of 5.
in the context of a tune, if we take a tune like "Our Love Is Here to Stay," so that first chord, right, that G7 in the key of F, we're in the key of F. We're gonna get out of the key of C flat. In the key of F, we have a G7. Now this is a perfect opportunity where you can use the Lydian dominant. That it's based off of the D melodic minor, but it's that raised 4th dominant scale on G. We had some listeners from our
And just the F major raised 5th major
exactly
7.
that arpeggio
to the
you're
9th.
talking about, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
That sound is really what you hear a lot of jazz musicians going for. And then from there you can go to the 5. So it works great as a scale to use over a 5 of 5. A 5 of 5 being like in a 2-5-1, making the 2 instead of Dorian, like a dominant, and you would use that Lydian dominant more often than you would use just a straight Mixolydian.
Yeah, and I love that the way that you've explained it on this tune, because the 5 of 5, or the 2 in this case, it almost, you can see how it works better by how this sounds. If you Like if you go to the 5, that's okay, but it doesn't really, even though it leads up to there nicely, I don't know, it just works better here. You've got choices on the 5. You can go, with some other alterations, or you can go kind of sus, and then, you know.
What sounds really good, which you'll hear in a lot of like string arrangements or whatever, is when you have this Lydian dominant on the 2, right? You have this A arpeggio on the top, and then when you go to the 5, you do an altered thing.
Yep.
Right? So the A arpeggio on top becomes an A flat.
Yep.
You know?
Love it.
So the next level of using a Lydian dominant is, again, on a secondary dominant context, but it's really on what we're going to call a cycle of dominants. Think the bridge to rhythm changes, right? Where we have D7, G7, C7, and then F7.
That's a perfect time to dominate your Lydian dominant.
So on the series of dominants, you'll often hear players use all Lydian dominants on this because, or a mixture of using a Lydian dominant for a bar to something more dominant, like a altered or a half whole scale or something like that. But that Lydian dominant, because it's more airy and loose and sort of up in the air, it gives us a sense that we're not on a tonic, that we're somewhere in between something.
Right.
You know?
And I love that because it as we said at the beginning, it's just a little bit of tension, but because you're building it up and you don't know when it's gonna resolve, the added effect, especially over the rhythm changes. Perfect example. You know, it's cumulative, right? So by the time you get to the last one, you have the memory of the one, but you've gone on such a journey because if you're B flat, once you get to the bridge, you know, the listener, you kind of lose feeling of where the tonic is. But when you get here, you're kind of like, oh, yeah, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So it's just the right amount of tension. Of course, typically other alterations are added, especially once you get to the 5, but they're not really needed.
Yep.
You know,
Agreed.
and you can get some good things.
Yeah, man.
A lot of good, pairs that are moving around, interesting melodically as you solo. Triad pairs, I should say. That's kind of an example of adding a little more tension, only the flat 9. So it's not strictly Lydian dominant, but just adding the flat 9 on the 5. That's a kind of a cool way to use it too.
That's so good, man. Cool. The last way we'll talk about is on a blues. And this is like, there's a blues.
You got a list over there? What are you doing? Why are you so much more organized than me, man?
Because we've already done this episode.
Oh, that's right.
We've already figured it out.
Okay.
The blues is a series of dominant chords. And, typically we'll use a Mixolydian. Right? But if we want to air it out, it's almost not humorous, but it's more of a airy, like less sophisticated, somehow more angular sound to use a Lydian dominant.
Thelonious Monk had
Thelonious Monk was a big fan.
On Underground.
And again, when you get to the 2-5 at the end, you can use
Monk
that Lydian
truly
dominant.
Monk knew how to dominate the Lydian dominant.
That's right. So anytime there's like a dominant chord where it's not a 5-1, this is like prime opportunities for Lydian dominance.
Yeah. And talking about Monk, oftentimes the way that we can kind of go next level off of the Lydian dominant is, we think about it being like C7, sharp 11, and then to altered, and then to 1. But that actually is not quite as effective, I think, as like Lydian dominant to then to whole tone and then to 1. That's a little bit more of a logical or interesting. I mean, look, you've got a lot of different choices, but that's one that like Monk would do a lot for sure.
Let's hear an example of this. Would you mind playing 2 choruses of a blues? Play the first chorus with using mostly Mixolydian, no Lydian dominance.
Okay.
And then play the second chorus leaning more on the Lydian dominant.
Okay, so... Lydian dominant.
Ooh, that's nice. real talk, that's a human sound right there.
It is. No, that's a fun thing.
It's beautiful.
And I think too, what that kind of highlighted was it is light and it is airy, but when we're doing it on a blues and we're just doing it on a 1, like all those other examples we had were really 5/5 or 5/1, a true dominant kind of function. But when we're doing it on a blues, on a 1 chord, it still brings out a little bit of that bluesy. There's that implication of the blues there. Yeah. And, in terms of usage, we'll play with that sometimes. Because it's a way to take it from being like super traditional to a little bit another sort of level. Not a higher level, just a different place. Bebop. I mean, Charlie Parker playing a lot of Lydian numbers.
For sure.
But then you can throw in the blues, and that note is common between those.
It's awesome. So good. So that's how you dominate your Lydian dominants. Enjoy that.
I wonder if this episode will ever get out. The other one is just like, man, it's just lingering there. Maybe
that was
this
a
one
lame
was
episode.
better.
We were terrible on that anyway.
Really? Okay, good.
No,
That's what we gotta do.
It was a perfect You'll Hear It episode.
Oh, it was?
Yeah,
Well, anyway. So we are sponsored by Open Studio Jazz, and we actually have a beautiful little message from one of our members. Check it out.
Hey, this is Rob, longtime listener of the podcast and big fan of Adam and Pete. I just wanted to tell you all about a little thing that happened to me, which tied a bunch of the podcasts together. So Adam and Pete always say, listen, if you're going to play your horn, like touch your instrument 15 minutes a day, and don't miss too many days. So I had a day where I was had missed a couple of days before and wanted to get on the horn, and I was just messing around, flailing around, and I was thinking back to the episode of how to rock a 15-minute practice. And I said, okay, I'm going to concentrate for 15 minutes. I'm going to get something done. And I was thinking, they did a recent podcast on the Phrygian mode. I'm like, well, the Phrygian mode, I hadn't thought about that. So I'm going to play the Phrygian scale in all 12 keys. And I know my major scales. And so I thought I'd do the Phrygian in all 12 keys. Then I thought, because they'd had an episode on creative scale practice. So I'm going to do the Dorian scale in all 12 keys. I'm going to do it in thirds. So I'm fancy, so I'm going to do it alternating up a third, down a third, up a third, because I know my scales. So first of all, I don't know my Phrygian scale at all because I had to relate it back in every instance to the major key. And it's like, that's not how you should really think about the scale. You need to think about it, because I don't think about the Dorian scale that way. It's not a second to a second. It's the Dorian scale. So I got deep into it. I'm like, okay, I don't know the Phrygian scale. So then I did my Dorian scales. And it's good for D Dorian, G Dorian, but do I really know A flat Dorian, up and down, alternating thirds? And the answer is no. So that 15-minute practice session turned into a 45-minute practice session, super efficient, and got it done. That's my story.
Awesome. If you want to leave us your open studio story, go to you'llhearit.com and leave us a speak pipe, leave us a voicemail. Tell us your story.
That's right. Tell us your story.
Yeah.
Until tomorrow.
You'll hear it.